One Piece. What can I say that hasn't already been stated numerous times on the internet about this series? It's good, it's bad, it's mid, it's trash. I think everybody's expressed their opinions from everything previously mentioned under the sun. I myself consider myself a fan of One Piece. I've been reading it for a while now. It took me since high school to catch up, but I finally did it. And I would like today to talk about my favorite aspect of the series, and I think one of the most iconic aspects of the series in general, the iconic Devil Fruit power system for the first half of the story, and even still very important, including up to the chapters released today. I would like to try and kind of like put them into a 5e D&D system, because they're really cool, and I really want people to get to use them. But I feel like it's really hard considering how individualized they are and how unique each one is compared to the other ones, especially for like the Paramecia class fruits. So I kind of tried my best to make a system where they would work for the D&D 5e play system, because I feel like that's the most popular and that's the one that most people know how to play. So for beginners, this will be, good to work in for. And I want to preface this all by saying that I tried looking up different 5e systems that people have made online. I'll try to link to a couple of them I found below if you want to look at those as good resources. I feel like I gained a lot of inspiration from those. They were really helpful. So I'll describe how I think the Devil Fruits would work, but I don't want to try and take credit exclusively for the system, because I feel like I was definitely influenced by the people I found online talking about it beforehand, and they've covered much more than just the Devil Fruits. They have their own racial abilities, unique classes to use, and I remember one of them even had different skills you could learn based on your role on the ship, which I feel like would be really cool and helpful for a lot of people if you try to run a One Piece D&D 5e game. So I'll leave those in the description or comment or whatever, and use those as you see fit. So I feel like the best way to start off would be to tell you how I think the best way, I guess, for the Devil Fruits to work, and I kind of just used a charge system similar to the spell slot system in 5e, where you have a certain number of charges for each level you have in your Devil Fruit, and specific abilities will use a certain amount of charges. I'll explain each one whenever we get to each Devil Fruit, because I will describe every Devil Fruit the series has had up till this point to the best of my ability in terms of how it would work for the game system. Hopefully this will give you a better idea of how, if you want to make your own Devil Fruit for a game, how to create it in this specific system if you want to use it or change it or whatever. Just a resource. Feel free to change anything you see in here as you'd like. So starting off, whenever you first eat your Devil Fruit, that's going to count as I don't know if you want to count it as what level you eat it is what level your mastery with it is, or if you want to use its own mastery leveling up from 1 to 20. I would personally do that just because you can be strong as all get out and still not be able to use a Devil Fruit whenever you first eat it to its maximum capacity. So I'll just refer to Devil Fruit levels as Devil Fruit levels, but if you just want to start a campaign where you eat a Devil Fruit at level 1, then might as well ignore it, because you can just level up with your character's levels. So starting at 1 level of your Devil Fruit mastery, you only have 2 Devil Fruit charges that are restored after a long rest, or half as much if only short rested. With each 2 levels gained in your mastery, you gain 1 more Devil Fruit charge, so by the end, I believe that should be 12 Devil Fruit charges, which I feel like should work for the system because it kind of limits some of their greater powers, but as you'll see, the ones that have more less restrictive or less stamina intensive powers, I'll have those passive effects that don't require a fruit charge. So Luffy, it doesn't seem like it costs him too much just to be able to stretch his body, considering it's just a natural trait his Devil Fruit gives him. So something like that would just be a passive ability that doesn't require any specific charges. So now that we have the most basic abilities out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about how each specific class of Devil Fruit is going to work. Starting with Paramecias, I'll just say that it's going to be a purely case-by-case basis, and we'll cover each one as we get to them. They won't have any large class-spanning abilities that you'd see across the board, considering their whole point is to be as diverse as possible. This is the other category for devil fruits. Logias will all have the default ability to evade an attack by becoming your element as a reaction, and it uses a charge. This will just be something across the board. I feel like it keeps it pretty simple, since considering at level 1 you won't be invincible, because you'll just be able to avoid 2 actions per day, or 2 attacks per day, considering you'll have to use a whole charge every time. So I feel like it keeps them really powerful, but still kind of limited. Logia devil fruits are also going to be very dependent on what kind of devil fruit you eat, but they'll pretty much give you a lot of ability to treat your specific attack damage as different types of damage. So the Mare fruit would give you the ability to treat any unarmed strike, I guess, as fire damage. And zone devil fruits are going to be focused on a 3-stage transformation system. For the characters that have their own unique ways of transforming, I believe it's just Chopper and his Rumble Ball, and I think Kaido has different forms of transformation. But for that, I'll just leave that to something that you can figure out, because it's a lot. It's like the same thing with Devil Fruit Awakenings. I'm not going to cover that because it seems like that's also very case-by-case basis, and I don't want to do a large, all-encompassing system for that, because it doesn't seem very fair, considering how powerful it should make the Devil Fruit, and how individualized I feel like it should be. But 3 stages of your zone devil fruit transformation is going to be your normal form, which will just be your character's normal stats. It'll be your animal form, which will just be based on the equivalent or most equivalent animal that you can find, and just use their stats for that form. So if you turn into a cow, you can just use the cow stat line from I think the Monster Manual. And your third form is obviously your man-beast form, which you'll just be able to add 2 of the beast stat modifiers to your equivalent stat modifiers. So if its 2 highest modifiers are in, let's say, strength and constitution, you'll just add those to your modifier. Each of these transformations, whenever you do transform, will require 1 charge to use. So at level 2, you'll only really be able to transform twice per day, but at higher levels, it'll be able to transform more often, which I feel gives it a good limitation, considering zone devil fruits are mostly just about giving you more physical power, which is kind of what the system I made will be most suited for. And things like mythical zones, I'll get into how their specific abilities work, considering they also have weird paramecia-like abilities that go along with them. Alright, and with all that being said, I think I'm ready to go ahead and get into talking about each and every devil fruit in this 1,100 plus chapter series. Let's go. Alright, now getting into the devil fruits of the series, I'm going to try and cover each of them semi-based on appearance order and semi-based on importance. So we're just going to go ahead and get started with the first devil fruit in the series in the East Blue, Monkey D. Luffy's Gum Gum fruit. It is a paramecia, and as a passive effect, your unarmed strikes gain up to 30 feet effective range past your normal reach. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to gain another 10 feet times charges used effective range on your next unarmed strike. And the times charges used is going to be a repeating factor across a lot of these devil fruit, just to better show how growth can affect your devil fruit based on using more charges will give you a stronger effect. And when you have 6 or more total fruit charges, you can, as a primary action, use 2 charges to gain a new rubber properties for 1d8 turns. And this is really the best thing I could think of to show Luffy's different gear transformations, such as 2, 3, 4. 5 is a weird one because it changes how the devil fruit works, meaning it's not a paramecia. It's like a mythical zone, but I didn't want to treat it as such, I guess, because he doesn't necessarily have any transformations. As far as I know, he just has what I assume to be Gear 5 being his beast form, I guess, in his normal form. And he doesn't really have an in-between, I guess. Or I could be totally wrong about it, and my understanding just not be there. But just, again, if you want to change it, feel free to. Oh, and as a defensive measure for Luffy's Gum Gum fruit, he takes 0 damage from non-magical blunt attacks, which might seem a bit overpowered, but it's the best thing I could really think of for how he's pretty much immune to blunt damage attacks. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, so... I mean, if you want to change that, I guess like it'd be like an immunity, but, you know, again, feel free to change anything you don't agree with. It's just the best thing I could think of for it. And when I say non-magical from here on, I'm just referring to hockey. So, like, hockey-based bludgeoning attacks would hurt Luffy, obviously. Next is Buggy's Chop Chop Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to gain the following effects for 1 times the charges used, D4 turns. All slashing damage attacks have disadvantage on hitting you, and your attacks can hit from anywhere within a 30-foot radius around you. Next, we have our first Logia, Smoker, and his Smoke Fruit. As a reaction to any non-magical attack, you can use 1 fruit charge to avoid that attack. This is referring to the basic default ability all Logias have. I mentioned at the start of the video. I'll bring it up a few times just for remembrance for the first few Logias, but I'll drop after a while just because I assume it becomes common knowledge at that point, and I really don't feel like repeating it over and over again, to be fair. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to move an additional 10 feet for 1 times charges used D4 turns. And as a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to turn a 10-foot area around you hard to see for 1 times charges used D4 turns. I didn't know any other better way to describe it. It just makes the area smoky and you can't see. In our last devil fruit from the East Blue, we have Alvida and her Slip Fruit. As a passive, you take half damage from all non-magical melee attacks. So it's just, I mean, it's a little overpowered defensively speaking, but I mean, it's really the best I can think of, considering she's quite literally immune to all attacks that slide across her body that we've been able to see so far. And as a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to become immune to all non-magical / non-devil fruit-based damage for 1 times charge used D4 turns. And this is just kind of my interpretation of a stronger form of her ability by making herself even more slippery, I guess. Alright, and now moving on from the East Blue into the Grand Line, we're going to start with the Alabasta saga. So we'll just kind of work our way through that, starting with Mr. 5 and his Bomb Fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to cause an explosion around a part of your body when you land your next unarmed strike on a being or object, causing an extra 1 times charge used D4 fire damage. The exact range is kind of varied considering the radius of the explosions we see him use are somewhat different throughout the different fights we see him in. So I think that's another one that I'll just leave up to homebrewing, you know, how the explosions work. If you want to, I feel like the best thing you can do is just make them larger with experience. Next is the Kilo Fruit. This one's a bit wordy, so please pardon me for having to shorten and whatnot. But as a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to increase your weight by 1,000 pounds times charges used until the end of your turn. If you fall while in this state, you gain 1 strength for each 1,000 pounds gain. This is just kind of the best way I could show her falling attack, just trying to crush people. Just making it like a strength check, I guess, but I don't know how you would like to rule it. This is just how I would do it personally. And as a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to decrease your weight by 50 pounds times charges used, with a minimum weight of 1 pound until your next turn. In this state, you gain 1 dexterity for each charge used, and again, this is the same with the falling action, but as her being light enough to float and being more nimble. Now we have Robin's Flower Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create 1 times charges used D4 duplicates of your own limbs or body parts within your eyesight. The more total charges you have, the higher level dice you can use when creating duplicate limbs. So 4 total charges equals a D6, 5 charges equals a D8, 7 charges equals a D10, 9 charges equals a D12, 10 charges equal a D20, and 12 charges equal a D100, which is kind of how Robin seems to be able to create more and more limbs with her higher level of Devil Fruit Mastery. Mr. 3's Wax Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a 5-foot times charges used size wax object / construct. This object is permanent and melts 3 feet in size per turn when close to fire. Now we have our first zone to talk about, which is Dalton's Ox Fruit Model Bison. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to shift to your original beast or hybrid form. In beast form, use cow stat lines. In your man beast form, add cow's strength and constitution modifier to your strength and constitution modifier. And again, this is just kind of covering the basic ability of the zone transformations, just so it makes... So like, for a reminder before we get too far into the video. Now we have Chopper's human fruit, which is going to be a little different, which makes it a little confusing considering it's only the second zone to talk about. Firstly, if eaten by a human, nothing happens. It's just the human fruit. If eaten by an animal, they can understand and speak common. When eaten, create a human character to use as your beast form, considering you just become a human. And in your man beast form, add your human form's intelligence and wisdom modifier to your intelligence and wisdom modifier. I kind of chose those stats specifically because Chopper seems to not get much stronger in his hybrid form, and more or less just more intelligent. Wapple's Munch fruit. As a primary action, you can eat anything or anyone that is 5 foot times your total charges or smaller. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to fuse consumed objects or people together or with yourself for 1 times charges used d4 turns. These fusion results have the full abilities of each component, and a fused being has the combined stats of the components. Mr. Tu Bonclay's Clone fruit. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to change your appearance into a person you have touched before. This form lasts until you dispel it or until you're knocked out. Given how we don't really see this fruit's major abilities, I guess this is really the best thing I can think for it, because it doesn't seem to grow much throughout the series. Mr. Four's dog gun, I guess. Lasso and its dog fruit model Dachshund. Just use the Mastiff stat line for your beast form, and in your man beast form, add Mastiff dexterity and constitution mod to your mod. Miss Merry Christmas's Mole fruit. Use giant badger stat line with a digging speed of 30 feet, and in your man beast form, add giant badger constitution and wisdom mod to your mod. This is an example of something where, to the best of my ability, I couldn't find a mole stat line for the D&D 5e game system, so I kind of just used the closest relative animal and just modified it so it would make sense. So I just gave a badger a digging speed to simulate a mole, essentially. Mr. One's Dice fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to treat all of your unarmed attacks as slicing damage for 1 times charge used d4 turns. Again, this is another one that's kind of hard to represent its power, considering I think a lot of the strength that Mr. One shows just comes from himself being very physically strong and not his devil fruit being inherently strong. Considering if you can just turn your hand to a knife, your hand doesn't get much stronger, it just becomes a knife. Miss Doublefinger's Spike fruit. When you make an unarmed strike, you can use any amount of fruit charges to extend your strike by 5 times charges used feet, and is treated as piercing damage. Now we have Crocodile and his Sand fruit. As a reaction to any non-magical attack, you can use 1 fruit charge to avoid that attack. Again, it's the basic Logia powers again. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to A. Incorporate all sand within 20 feet of you, times charges used, into your next unarmed strike. The amount absorbed is converted into the size of the attack. Or B. Become incorporeal while dry for 1 times charge used d4 turns. And as a bonus action, you can use 1 charge to drain the moisture from any held being or object, dealing 1d10 damage. Now we have Pell's Bird fruit model Falcon. As a primary action, you can use 1 fruit charge to shift between your original beast and hybrid forms. Again, basic zone powers. Use Giant Eagle stats for your beast form, and your man beast form, add Giant Eagle strength and dexterity mod to your mod. Chaka and his dog fruit model Jackal. Use Jackal stat lines for your beast form, and your man beast form, add Jackal dexterity and wisdom mod to your mod. Now we have Ace and his Flame fruit. As a reaction to any non-magical attack, 1 fruit charge to avoid that attack. You can use 1 fruit charge to treat your next unarmed strike as fire damage, and as primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level charges to cast any fire damaging spell. And this is how I'm going to have most of the Logias work from here on, where you can cast spells, I guess, equivalent to what your element would be. So for something like we'll get to later, Aokiji's Ice Fruit, you'll be able to cast cold damaging spells. But we'll get into each one whenever we get to it. And lastly for Alabasta, we have Hina and her Cage Fruit, which was a little hard to construct considering we haven't seen it in use much. But as a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a simple iron shape of 5 foot times charges used in size or less within reach of you. Any being who touches your iron objects must pass a DC 15 strength save or become binded. Alright, now we can move on to the only 3 devil fruits that appear in Skypia, starting with Bellamy and his Spring Fruit, which is my personal favorite in the series. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to turn your body parts into springs and gain 1 dexterity for each charge used for 1d4 turns. Pierre and his Horse Fruit. Just use Warhorse stat lines for your beast form, and your man beast form add Warhorse strength and constitution mod to your mod. And lastly for Skypia, we have Eneru and his Rumble Fruit. Again, as a reaction to any non-magical attack, 1 fruit charge, avoid that attack. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to instantly teleport up to 100 feet times charges used away in any direction. As a primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level charges to cast any lightning damaging spell. Alright, now on to the litany of devil fruits we see used in Enies Lobby. Unfortunately, starting with Silver Fox Foxy. He has the slow fruit. If you can read. I don't want to talk about him. Now we have Aokiji and his chili fruit. Again, I'm going to stop reiterating the basic devil fruit points from this point forward. When touching a person, you can use 1 fruit charge to immobilize a target in ice for 1d4 turns, and they take 1d8 cold damage every turn till unfrozen. As a primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level charge to cast any cold damaging spell. Blue Nose Door Fruit. When touching a surface, you can use 1 fruit charge to create a door equal to your size or smaller on that surface, and doors dissipate when they close. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to make a 5 foot times charges used air door. This air door is a portal to a pocket dimension, which is the same as your surroundings, but with no other beings in it. Now we'll get to breeze through a batch of zone devil fruits, starting with Lucci's Cat Fruit, modeled leopard. Use Tiger stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Tiger strength and dexterity mod to your mod. Spandam Sword Funkfried and its Elephant Fruit. Use Elephant stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Elephant strength and constitution mod to your mod. Jabra and his Dog Fruit model Wolf. Use Direwolf stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Direwolf strength and dexterity mod to your mod. My favorite zone, Kaku and his Ox Fruit model Giraffe. Use Giraffe stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Giraffe strength and dexterity mod to your mod. And now back to a Paramecia, we have Khalifa and her Soap Fruit. While grappling a being, you can use 1 fruit charge to reduce their movement speed to 5 feet, their dexterity becomes 0, and they cannot hold objects all for 1d4 turns. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to create a 3 foot times charge used orb of soap that causes all others who touch it to lose 1d20 strength and dexterity for 1d4 turns. This orb can be thrown as a bonus action. Now, the only manga-only fruit, we have Sharin Guru and his Wheel Fruit. When making a melee strike, you can use any amount of fruit charges to spin parts of your body and add 1 times charges used d4 damage of whatever type you would already be doing to that attack. And as a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to increase your movement speed 5 feet times charges used for 1d4 turns. Shu and his Rust Fruit. When touching a metal object, you can, as a bonus action, use any amount of fruit charges to rust and decay 4 foot times charge used of that touched object. Berry Good and his Berry fruit. As a reaction to any bludgeoning damage attack, you can use one fruit charge to avoid the attack, similar to how Logias work. When you make an unarmed strike, you can use any amount of charges to attack from any angle within a 10-foot times charge used radius around you for that attack. And lastly, I'll go ahead and do this one now. Blackbeard's Darkness fruit, or dark fruit, I believe. When making physical contact with a devil fruit user, they cannot use their devil fruit abilities. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a 10-foot times charge used AoE, area of effect, where other devil fruits cannot be used within it, and all objects and beings get pulled towards you at 10 feet per turn. And if you take 30 or more points of damage in one attack, you become knocked prone. And this was kind of the best way I could use to show Blackbeard's weakness whenever it comes to taking a lot of damage. So he kind of gets knocked down a lot. Also, for this fruit, I would ignore the standard Logi ability to turn to your element to avoid attacks, considering he's never shown that ability, so I assume he can't use that. Alright, now with Enies Lobby done, I think we can move on to Thriller Bark with probably the three most complicated abilities I had to come up with. We'll go ahead and start off with Brook and his Revive fruit. Once after you die, your soul spawns in 3 days after your passing in the exact location of your death. It can move 500 miles per day and requires no rest until reunited with your body. After being reunited, you can, as a primary action, use one fruit charge to send out your soul to move on your turn instead of your body. It is intangible and has a speed of 50 feet. After reunited, you can use any amount of charges to deal an extra 1 times charge use d4 cold damage on your next melee attack. And again, these were the best ways I could really show off Brook's Devil Fruit ability. I feel like some the later after getting reunited abilities might be a bit tricky in considering the lore, I guess, considering we don't see Brook use any of those until post time skip. But I feel like that's because he had zero Devil Fruit mastery up until that point, considering he was just floating around for 50 years, not fighting much, and he only did about once or twice before uniting with the Straw Hats, and even still after that he didn't get much combat experience. So I feel like he would have only had level 1 mastery up till that point. Now for an easy Devil Fruit, before we get into some more complicated ones, Absalom's Clear Fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to cast Greater Invisibility on yourself for 1 times charge use d4 turns. Pretty simple. Perona and her Hollow Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to summon 1 times charges used d4 Ghost of 2 types. Negative Ghosts that reduce the wisdom and intelligence of any being they touch to 0 for 1 d4 turns, or Explosive Ghosts which cause a 5-foot explosion on contact dealing 1d8 fire damage. As a primary action, you can use 1 charge to astral project yourself as a ghost of any size between your normal height and giant sized. In this form, you have a speed of 50 feet. Now for this wall of text, we have Moria and his Shadow Fruit. Alright, as a primary action, you can force one being within your reach to pass a DC 15 Wisdom save or have their shadow cut off and knocked prone. The shadow is added to your collection, and beings without a shadow evaporate when exposed to sunlight, and their shadow also disappears. Next, you can perform a ritual to combine a shadow from your collection and a corpse within your reach to create a zombie with the physical attributes of the corpse and the techniques of the shadow's owner. After 3 hours, these shadows fully obey your every command. If the shadow's owner dies, the ritual is undone. If the zombie dies, the shadow returns to the owner. And, I forgot to add this, if the zombie consumes salt, the shadow is released. And lastly, as a primary action, you use any amount of fruit charges to summon your shadow as a duplicate of you with the same abilities, stats, for 1 times charge used d4 turns. This shadow has its own initiative, and you can use 1 charge on either yours or the shadow's turn to instantly swap places with each other. Last for Thriller Bark, we have Kuma and his Paw Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to turn an object you touch into a high-speed projectile that travels instantaneously in a straight line and deals 1 times charge used d10 damage to all beings in the path that fail a DC 15 Dex or Strength save. As a primary action, you can use 3 charges to push a target within reach to an island you have been to before. It takes 3 days for them to arrive. Alright, now on to Sabaody Archipelago. Never knew how to pronounce this one. We'll go ahead and talk about all of the Supernova's devil fruits, as well as all of the devil fruits shown in Amazon Lily, considering it's fairly short. We'll go ahead and start off with Law and his Op fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a 10-foot times charge used radius around you for 1d4 turns. While you are in this room, you can freely move around anything within this area until this space dissipates. Other beings take no damage from your manipulation in this space, obviously unless you're attacking them with a physical object. Eustace Kid and his Magnet fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to either 1. Pull all metal objects within a 10-foot times charge used radius towards you and form them into a simple shape or construct. Or push away all metal objects within a 10-foot times charge used radius of you. Flying metal objects deal 1d8 bludgeoning damage to all beings in the way, unless it's like a cutting object, of course. Capone Beiji and his Castle fruit. The inside of your body is a limited pocket space that takes the appearance of a fortress of your design. Only those you allow in and out may come in and out as they please. As primary action, you can use 1 fruit charge to create a castle weapon on your body, such as cannons, tank treads, or other traps until the end of your turn. And as primary action, you can use 3 or more charges to transform into a full-size walking castle for 1 times charges used d4 turns. This form has 400 hit points, double your strength and constitution, and half your dexterity. Now for another kind of confusing one, we have Basil Hawkins' Straw fruit. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to create weapons and items out of straw, such as a piercing spear, grappling whip, or bludgeon protection. These straw items are destroyed when on fire. As a ritual, you can use 1 charge to create a small voodoo doll within your body that represents a person within your reach. If you take damage, you can choose to have that doll take the damage instead. All damage the doll takes is reflected on the representative, and after taking damage, the doll is destroyed. You can only hold up to 10 dolls within you at a time. Scratchman Apu and his Tone fruit. As a bonus action, you use any amount of fruit charges to turn parts of your body into musical instruments that deal 1 times charge used d8 damage when played. These instruments can be played as a primary action, and they change back after 1d4 turns. The type of damage dealt by these instruments depends on the type of instruments being played. Strings do slashing damage, woodwinds and brass are piercing damage, and percussions are bludgeoning. X Drake and his Dragon fruit model Allosaurus. Use Allosaurus stat line for your beast form, and in your man-beast form, add Allosaurus strength and constitution mod to your mod. Jewelry Bonnie's HH fruit, I believe was the name. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to either increase or decrease your age by 10 times charge used years. At 10 years or younger, or 80 years or older, your strength, dexterity, and constitution stats are halved. And as a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to either increase or decrease the age of all beings within your reach by 10 times charges used years with the same stat changes as above. And with Bonnie's Distorted Future ability, where she takes on a different possible future outcome, I don't really know how best to include that, considering how wildly different it is and how extremely varied it can be. Hypothetically, I assume she can just choose to a future where she's a cyborg and get a bunch of laser beams and stuff. So that's something I guess I'll leave at your discretion if you have a player that wants to use this fruit for whatever reason like that. Kizaru and his Glint fruit. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to instantly teleport up to 100 feet away in any direction, similar to Eneru's Rumble fruit. And as primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level charges to cast any radiant damaging spell. Now moving on to the devil fruits from Amazon Lily. We have Boa Hancock and her Love fruit. As a bonus action, after landing an unarmed strike, you can use 1 fruit charge to petrify the part of a person you hit. Petrification is permanent, and can only be dispelled by you, and petrified limbs cannot be used. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to fire a 10-foot times charges used cone that petrifies all beings in range that find the user attractive and fails a DC 15 Wisdom save. The rules of petrification apply, and if a petrified being is smashed, they die. Next, for her sisters, we have Marigold and her Snake Fruit model King Cobra. Use giant poisonous snake stats for your beast form, and in your man beast form, add giant poisonous snake dexterity and constitution mod to your mod. And lastly, we have Sanderzonia and her Snake Fruit model Anaconda. Use giant constrictor snake stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form, add giant constrictor snake strength and dexterity mod to your mod. And with all that, I feel like we can now move on to Impel Down. For our first devil fruit in Impel Down, we'll start with Inazuma and their Snip fruit. As bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to turn parts of your body into scissors for 1 times charges used D4 turns. When these scissors are used to cut inanimate material, they gain the properties of paper, such as a lightweight and flexibility, but retain their density and durability. Next is Ivankov and their Hormone fruit, or Hormone fruit. As bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to change the size of your body parts or change your gender for 1 time charge used D4 turns. Heal yourself of 1 time charge used D4 damage, or remove 1 point of exhaustion for 1 time charge used D4 turns. And as a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to use the previous effects on a being within your reach. And our last little fruit for Impel Down, we have Magellan and his Venom fruit. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to coat your body in poison, and all beings that you touch or touches you take 1d8 poison damage. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to create a poison construct that's 5 foot times charge used in size. Touching the construct acts the same as touching your poison coating. Alright, and with all that, I feel like we're ready to head on to the war at Marineford. We'll go ahead and start off with Whitebeard and his Tremor fruit. As a reaction to landing an unarmed strike, you can use any amount of fruit charges to deal an extra 1 time charge used D4 force damage. When landing an unarmed strike on the environment, you can use any amount of charges to make a 10 foot times charge used radius around your impact difficult terrain. We'll switch between the pirates and the marine devil fruits as we go through here. I don't have them in any particular order for this battle because it's hard to particularly remember in what order they showed up in. Suru and her Wash fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to make a being you have grappled pass a DC 15 Wisdom save, or have their alignment changed to lawful good for 1 time charges used D4 turns. Personally speaking, I just thought this was the best way to represent how the Wash fruit works, considering it washes out the evil in your heart or whatever. But if you don't like using alignments, like I don't like using them, you could just have them say that they fit whatever your character's ideal of goodness is, I guess. Now we have Sengoku and his human fruit, model Daibutsu. Use Empyrean stat lines for your beast form, and in your man beast form, add Empyrean strength and constitution mod to your mod. And while in your beast or man beast form, you can use 2 fruit charges to cast Sunburst from the palm of your hands. Next we have the pocket fruit, eaten by this guy whose name I don't care to remember. Once eaten, 2 pockets appear on the user's body that are portals to a pocket dimension. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to put an object up to 5 foot times charges used sized into your pocket space. And as a bonus action, you can pull any stored items out of your pocket space from the pockets on your body. Now we have Marco's Bird fruit model Phoenix. Use Phoenix stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form, add the Phoenix dexterity and constitution mod to your mod. I don't think there's an official 5e Phoenix stat mod, but I found some online, so you can find them easily through Googling. And I'll try to mention if there's any more that you can't find, like a Oh, I forgot. Like for Kaku's fruit, you'll have to Google that one because I don't think D&D actually has giraffe stats. As primary action in your beast or man-beast forms, you can use 1 times the spell level fruit charges to cast one of the following spells: Cure Wounds, Lesser/Greater Restoration, Heal, Healing Word, Mass Cure Wounds, Mass Heal, Mass Healing Word, Prayer of Healing, Regenerate, or Spare the Dying, which are all just healing-based spells. I included since Marco's fruit is all about healing. Jizu and his Twinkle Twinkle fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to cover your body in diamonds, which doubles your constitution and halves your dex for 1 time charges used d4 turns. And lastly, we'll end on Akainu and his Logia Magma fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to turn your body into magma for 1 times charges used d4 turns. In this state, all your unarmed strikes gain 1d8 fire damage, and as a primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level charges to cast any fire damaging spells. Alright, now that we've finished the first half of the series, before we move on to the new world, I want to stop and talk about the semi-cannon float fruit used by Shiki. When you make contact with an object, you can use any amount of fruit charges to make a 10-foot times charge used size object float into a position and freeze in place permanently. This effect is dispelled if you are knocked unconscious. Alright, now we can move on to Fishman Island, starting with Caribou and his Swamp Logia fruit. As primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to put an object or person in reach that's 10-foot times charges used or smaller into a swamp pocket dimension. As a bonus action, you can call forth objects from your swamp space, and as another primary action, you can use any amount of charges to turn a 10-foot times charges used area into quicksand for 1d4 turns. The Mark fruit. When you throw an object, you can use 1 fruit charge to have the thrown object home in on the last person you touched with your bare hand. You can only have 1 target for each hand you have, and when this ability is used, you can choose which target the thrown object is homing in on. And lastly, the Zone Devil fruit, the Turtle fruit. Use Giant Snapping Turtle stat line for your beast form, and in your man beast form, add Giant Snapping Turtle strength and constitution modifier to your modifier. Now in Punk Hazard, we'll start off with Kinemon and his Garb fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create clothing of your choice up to light armor. On all people within a 10-foot times charges used radius of you, this effect only applies to beings with rocks or leaves on top of their heads, and when the clothes are taken off, they vanish. Caesar Clown's Gas Logia. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to fire a 10-foot times charge used cone, line, or radius that causes all beings in range to take 1 times charge used d8 acid, cold, fire, necrotic, or poison damage, your choice. Also, all afflicted beings must pass a DC 15 Constitution save or take 1d4 of the chosen damage type at the start of their next 2 turns. This is kind of the best way I could think to show Caesar's weird chemical-based abilities, considering how he really just kind of changed the properties. I know it's a little bit more complex with that, considering it's scientific and all, and things like removing oxygen from the air isn't something I think is well accounted for in a 5e, but I mean, you can always make up your own rules for that as you go along if you'd like. Now I'm in a Snow fruit on top of the regular Logia actions. As a primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level fruit charges to cast any cold damaging spell. Pretty simple. We didn't really get to see too much of this, and I feel like a lot of the cold spells really cover the range of abilities we see Monet take. Smiley's Sala fruit, model Axolotl. Use Giant Lizard stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Giant Lizard strength and dexterity mod to your mod. Baby 5 and her Arms fruit. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to transform any part of your body into a weapon you have touched before. If in weapon form you would take damage from how your weapon works, then you take no damage and reform in your normal state. And while transformed, you remain in this state until you dispel it. I know it's not ever explicitly stated how Baby 5 specifically gains the specific transformations into weapons, if she just inherently has them or not, but I figured adding the touch limitation requirement would be a good enough rule to make it fairly balanced, so you couldn't just turn into like a tank on command. And lastly, we have Buffalo and his Spin fruit. As primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges, and if you have 2 or more limbs free, you can rotate at least 2 of your limbs and gain the ability to fly for 1 times charge used d4 turns. In this state, you have a fly speed of 10 feet times your total fruit charges with a maximum of 80 feet. Alright, now we get to move on to another arc full of paramecia and strange devil fruits, so we'll go ahead and start off with Doflamingo and his string fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to create 1 times charges used d10 strings from your body, which are 10 foot times charges used, long, and deal slashing damage when used as a weapon. If you have 5 or more strings active, you can, as primary action, make a being in range pass a DC 15 strength save or become under your control until they can pass the save on their turn. On the target's turn, you choose their actions if not succeeded. Bartolomeo and his barrier fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a simple shape out of an unbreakable glass that covers at most, a 10 foot times charges used area within 10 feet of you. While this shape is up, you cannot use one of your hands to hold object or grapple beings, and if this hand is damaged, the shape is dispelled. The hand damage and lack of being able to hold or grapple is in reference to the fact that the user has to cross the fingers on one of their hands. I figured this would make a reasonable enough limitation in the game for that. The legendary Jacket fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to transform yourself into a simple jacket that can be worn by any being of similar size to you. When worn, you control the actions of the wearer for 1 times charge used d4 turns. Viola's Glare fruit. As primary action, you use any amount of fruit charges to see around you in a 100 miles times charges used radius until your next turn. When you touch foreheads with someone, you can use 1 charge to exchange memories with that person. And as a primary action, you can use 1 charge to summon 2 50-foot lines of water in front of you that disperse, dealing 1d10 bludgeoning damage to all in range. Leo's Stitch fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to stitch 2 things within your reach together for 1 times charge used d4 turns. Stitching causes no damage, and beings stitched to the environment must pass a DC 15 strength save each turn or they remain restrained. The Bug fruit model Hornet. Use Giant Wasp stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Giant Wasp dexterity mod to your mod. The bug fruits will only have 1 modifier added because it's the only one they have a positive modifier in, such as the next one, the Bug fruit model Rhinoceros beetle. Use Giant Fire Beetle stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Giant Fire Beetle Constitution mod to your mod. Minus the glowing stuff, this was just the best beetle stat line I could find, I guess. Diamante and his Ripple fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to either A, allow your body to fold and bend like paper and increase your dexterity for 1 times charge used d4 turns, or B, give an object you're touching the same flexible properties for 1 times charges used d4 turns. The Art fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to expel a 10-foot times charge used cloud that halves the strength and dexterity of all beings in range, and all objects lose their function. These effects last for 1d4 turns or dispelled when you are knocked out. The Pop fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to cause a 5-foot times charge used size object to explode. This explosion has a radius equal to the object's size, and all beings in range must pass a DC 15 dexterity or constitution save, or take 1 times charges used d8 piercing damage. The Ton fruit, literally just a direct upgrade to the Kilo fruit, but with increments of 10,000 pounds instead of 1,000 pounds. The Stone fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to merge with up to a 25-foot times charge use size stone structure, and control it as your body for 1 times charges used d4 turns. For each charge you used, gain 1 strength and constitution while you are in your merged form. The Swim fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to treat all terrain you touch as water for 1 times charge used d4 turns. Pretty simple. And now one not so simple, we have the Hobby fruit. Firstly, after eating this fruit, your body no longer ages, and you are perpetually the age you are whenever you ate the fruit. I don't know if this is literal immortality or simply de-aging, but you can still die of old age. I guess it's up to your discretion. When you touch a being, you can use one fruit charge to turn the being into a toy, and they must follow your every instruction. Personally, I would just use the monodrone stat line for the toys, but if you find something that works better, go ahead. All beings lose their memories of anyone turned into a toy this way until the toy is reverted to their original form. And if you are knocked out, then the previous two effects are dispelled. Now, the sticky fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to either A, turn a 10-foot times charges used radius around you into difficult terrain for 1d4 turns, or B, cover yourself in mucus for 1 times charge used d4 turns. In this state, anyone that touches you must pass a DC 15 strength save or have their touching body parts become stuck to the user until this state is dispelled. The Calm fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a 5-foot times charge used radius sphere around you where all sound within cannot escape, and it lasts for 1 times charges used d4 turns. The Heal fruit. As a primary action, you can use 1 fruit charge to cast Cure Wounds, or 3 charges to cast Mass Cure Wounds. The Press fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to gain a flying speed of 40 feet for 1 times charges used d4 turns. As a primary action, you can use any amount of charges to turn a 10-foot times charges used radius in front of you into high gravity difficult terrain or low gravity, which causes all beings in range to float 10 feet off the ground. As a primary action, you can use 3 charges to cast Firestorm or 4 charges to cast Meteor Storm. And last for Dressrosa, we have the Brush fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to animate a drawing of yours for 1 times charge used d4 turns. For your creation, use the most relevant monster or animal stat line. Alright, now moving on to the 2 devil fruits we see in Zoe. We'll go ahead and start with Jack and his elephant fruit model Mammoth. Just use Mammoth stat line for your beast form and your man beast form. Add Mammoth strength and constitution mod to your mod. And Rhizo's scroll fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a 5-foot times charges used scroll that can store any object that is the same size as the scroll or smaller. This scroll can be opened again as a bonus action to release the object. Alright, and now back to another arc packed full of devil fruits, Whole Cake Island. Let's just go ahead and start off with Big Mom and her soul fruit. As primary action, you can use any amount of charges to take away 10 times charges used years from the lifespan of a person within your reach. You must pass an intimidation check or this action fails. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to animate an inanimate object within your reach and use 10 years of your stored lifespan. Animated objects move on their own and you have advantage on all charisma rolls towards the object. The Mirror fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create an illusion of one creature within your sight. This illusion is a mirrored reflection that performs the reverse of the base character's action. When touching a mirror, you can use 1 fruit charge to treat that mirror as a portal to a mirror pocket dimension that is connected to all mirrors within 100 miles of you. The Biscuit fruit or the Bisque fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to summon 1 times charges used d4 biscuit golems. I would just use the clay golem stat line minus things like the absolute absorption, berserk, immutable form, magic resistance, weapons, and haste, just because it's not something seen with the biscuit soldiers, and I feel like that would make them a little bit too strong individually. These golems also disintegrate in water and can be eaten. The Puff fruit. As bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to start rubbing your belly and summon a genie with the same stat line as you. It acts on your turn instead of you, but it can move up to 30 feet away from you, and this genie dissipates after 1 times charges used d4 turns. The Butter fruit. As primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a 5-foot times charges used orb that you can move up to 20 feet in any direction as a concentration spell on your turn. Any being that touches your orb must pass a DC 15 strength save or have any part of their body that touches the orb become stuck to the orb. This orb lasts for 1d4 turns. Katakuri's Mochi fruit. As a reaction to an attack, you can use 1 fruit charge to avoid that attack. This is similar to the Logia ability, considering he's a special Paramecia. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of charges to have all your unarmed strikes gain 30 feet effective range for 1 times charges used d4 turns. And as a passive, your body is sticky, and any being that touches you must pass a DC 10 strength save or become stuck until you let go of them. The Book Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to place 1 times charges used d4 books within your sight in any position, regardless of gravity, for 1 d4 turns. As a primary action, you can use 1 charge to trap 1 being within your size in a book of similar size to the targeted being if the target fails a DC 15 dexterity save. The Pile Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to fuse yourself with 1 times charges used other willing beings within your reach. The resulting being has the combined stats and abilities of the component beings, and this fusion lasts for 1d4 turns. The Cream Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to coat your body in cream and cover a 5-foot times charges used radius around you in cream, which becomes difficult terrain. This cream persists for 1 times charges used d4 turns. And other beings that touch your cream must pass a DC 15 Constitution save or take 2 d4 fire damage. The Heat Fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to deal an extra 1 times charges used d4 fire damage with all your melee strikes for 1 d4 turns. Perospero's Lick Fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to create a weapon or a simple construct out of candy syrup up to 5-foot times charges used in size. These constructs and weapons melt in high heat and can be consumed. The Memo Fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to make a being in your reach pass a DC 15 Wisdom save or lose the last 10 times charges used minutes of their memory. The Ring Fruit. As a primary action, you can use 1 fruit charge to give 1 grappled being 1 point of exhaustion, and I guess wring out their essence. You can rule that however you want. I don't know if that would restore your HP any, or restore a 1 point of exhaustion for you, I guess. I don't know, it really depends. It just seems like it's a normal liquid with a flavor to it, I guess. I'm not entirely sure. As a bonus action, when you have a large body of liquids within your reach, you can use any amount of fruit charges to grow 10 feet times charges used for 1d4 turns. In this state, you gain 1 strength, but minus 1 dexterity for each charge used. The Cook Fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to turn a 10-foot times charges used size object or smaller into a food of your choice. Baron Tamago and his bizarre zone egg fruit. Ignore the normal zone rules here, because his unique devil fruit is a bit different for that. But when you take 15 or more points of damage, you can use 1 fruit charge to change into your next form, depending on your current state. Your first state is the egg form, then your chick form, and then your rooster form. With each increase in form, you gain 1 to your strength and dexterity, and it resets at your egg form. Big News Morgan's bird fruit model Albatross. Use Bloodhawk stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Bloodhawk dexterity and wisdom mod to your mod. Also, I personally would remove the flying speed, considering I don't think we've ever seen Big News Morgan actually fly, and albatrosses are known to have a hard time flying because of their massive size. Now moving on to the devil fruits of the Revolutionary Army, we have the Pump fruit. As primary action, you can use 1 fruit charge to cast Beacon of Hope or Enhance ability. The Logia Suit fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to A. Create 1 5-foot times charges used size object out of suit that lasts for 1 times charges used d4 turns. Or B. Create 1 times charges used d4 5-foot or smaller sized object out of suit that lasts for 1 times charges used d4 turns. The Push fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to rearrange any environmental object you touch for 1 times charges used d4 turns, and the changes you make become permanent. And now on to Wano, with a massive list of zones and only a handful of paramecias to go over. We'll go ahead and start off with the Dog fruit model Tanuki. Use Badger stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Badger Constitution and Wisdom mod to your mod. Tama's Millet fruit. or dumpling fruit. I'm not particularly sure which one it was called. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to create 1d4 Kibidongo dumplings. Any animal that eats your Kibidongo must pass a DC 15 wisdom save or become obedient to you for 1 month. Shinobu's ripe fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to age a target by 10 times charges used years. This can decompose inanimate objects or age living beings. The human fruit model Yudo, Japanese words. Use Gladiator stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Gladiator strength and constitution mod to your mod. I assume this one is similar to more of a mythical zone, so I assume if you were a human to eat this fruit, you just become a larger, more powerful human, I guess. The time fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to send yourself and any beings you're touching 10 times charges used years into the future. Now for Kaido's fish fruit model Azure Dragon. Use your age range, Red Dragon stat line for your beast form, and in man beast form, add Red Dragon strength and constitution mod to your mod. I did the age range thing because we see Kaido and, spoiler alert, if you made it this far into the video without caring about that kind of stuff, we see Kaido as an adult dragon, and we see Momonosuke as an adult dragon when he's an adult, but when he's a child, we see him as a child dragon. So I assume it's a thing that affected by your age. So that's why I wanted to add that in there. Now moving into the rest of Kaido's crew, before we do, I want to emphasize I'm not going to talk about Smile Devil Fruits because they're their own kind of deal. And each one is also so different depending on the animal you get and how they form. Like 2 people, if they ate a bat Smile Devil Fruit, could grow wings that work or wings that are completely unfunctional. So I'm not even going to bother with those. If you want a character to be a Smile Zone user, just make it up, I guess. But starting with Kaido's crew that actually have devil fruits, we'll start with Black Maria and her spider fruit model Rosamigao. I don't know how to pronounce this word. An old giant. It's an ancient giant spider. Use giant spider stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add giant spider strength and dexterity mod to your mod. King and his dragon fruit model Pterodon. Use Pterodon stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Pterodon strength and dexterity mod to your mod. Orochi and his snake fruit model Yamata no Orochi. Use Hydra stat line for your beast form, but with 8 heads, and the heads cannot regrow. Also, the user only dies when all 8 heads have been cut off. In man beast form, add Hydra strength and constitution mod to your mod. Page 1's dragon fruit model Spinosaurus. This can be pretty much functionally the same as Drake's devil fruit, considering there's no Spinosaurus stat line. But if you want to change it for however a Spinosaurus would be different, please go ahead and inform me how. But just use Allosaurus stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Allosaurus strength and constitution mod to your mod. Queen and his dragon fruit model Brachiosaurus. Use Brontosaurus stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Brontosaurus strength and constitution mod to your mod. The dragon fruit model Triceratops. Use Triceratops stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Triceratops strength and constitution mod to your mod. The dragon fruit model Pachycephalosaurus, I think. Just use Deinonychus stat line for your beast form with a slam attack, and your man beast form add the dinosaur's name, strength and dexterity mod to your mod. The cat fruit model Sabertooth Tiger. Use Sabertooth Tiger stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Sabertooth Tiger strength and dexterity mod to your mod. The dog fruit model Yukichi no Makami, I guess. In any of your forms, you can use 1 charge to add an extra 1d8 cold damage to your next attack. Use Winterwolf stat line for your beast form, and in your man beast form, add Winterwolf strength and constitution mod to your mod. And our last devil fruit from Wano, we have Admiral Green Bull's Logia Woods fruit. As primary action, you can use 1 fruit charge to cast one of the following spells: Commune with Nature, Entangle, Find the Path, Good Berry, Grasping Vine, Guardian of Nature, only tree form, Locate Animals or Plants, just plants, Plant Growth, Poison Spray, Speak with Plants, Spike Growth, Thorn Whip, Tree Stride, Wall of Thorn, or Wrath of Nature, no rocks. These are just some of the best spells I could find that I think would fit the Woods fruit the best, considering its whole nature theming. Alright, now on to our final arc in One Piece and our most recent developments. We'll talk about the attack on Hachinosu and Egghead. We'll go ahead and start with the Blackbeard Pirates, and we'll start with Van Augur and his Warp fruit. As primary action, you can use one fruit charge to teleport yourself and any one/thing you're touching any distance within your eyesight. Every one/thing included needs one extra charge to teleport with you. Avalo Pizarro and his Isle fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to merge with an island you're on for 1 times charges used D4 turns. While island merged, you can freely control the terrain and sprout rocky limbs up to half the merged island's length. Doc Q's Sick fruit. As primary action, you can use 1 times the spell level fruit charge to cast any debuff spell. Burgess's Strong fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to gain 1 time charges used strength for 1d4 turns. Katarina Devon's Dog fruit, model 9-tailed fox. As primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to appear as any being you've touched before that is a similar size to you for 1 time charges used d4 turns. Use Wolf stat line for your beast form, and your man beast form add Wolf dexterity and wisdom mod to your mod. San Juan Wolf and his huge fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to grow 50 feet times charges used for 1d4 turns. Doc Q's Horse Stronger and their Horse fruit, model Pegasus. Use Pegasus stat line for your beast form, and in your man beast form, add Pegasus strength and constitution mod to your mod. And Vasco Shot's Glug fruit, which, as far as I know, I think we've only ever seen him just breathe fire with it, so I don't really know how to rule it. Given it's the Glug fruit and he becomes a liquor man, I don't know if it's some sort of Logia that makes him become like a liquor person, where he can use all of the Logia abilities, but he's made of like vodka or whatever. But for right now, I'll just leave this one blank. Sorry about that. The Whip fruit. As a bonus action, you can use 1 fruit charge to give a weapon you're holding the properties of a whip until you choose to dispel it. A being or object hit by your whip must pass a DC 15 wisdom save or listen to your commands for 1d4 turns. The Glurp fruit. As a primary action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to make 1 times charges used d4 clay golems. As a primary action, you can create a 5-foot times charges used or smaller clay object or shape. Dr. Vegapunk's Brain fruit. On each level up, you gain 1 intelligence point. Pretty straightforward. You can also perfectly recall any information you have heard or seen in the past. The way this works in universe, I assume you can just ask the DM to tell you again. Now for a couple of marine devil fruits we see in the attack on Egghead, we have the Ride fruit. As a bonus action, you can use any amount of fruit charges to take control of a grappled being for 1 time charges used d4 turns. You control the grappled being on your turn, and you cannot attack. This effect is dispelled when you ungrapple the being or you're knocked off. And our last devil fruit we have, as of, I believe, Chapter 1109 is supposed to come out today, but I believe this is the last one we've had up till this point. It appears to be an Otter Zone Devil Fruit. I don't know the exact name, but we'll just use Giant Weasel stat line for your beast form, but with a slam attack. In your man beast form, add Giant Weasel dexterity and wisdom mod to your mod. Alright, and I believe that is all of the devil fruits from the series covered in this D&D 5e system. If there's any I forgot about, please let me know. I'm bound to. And pardon for any spelling mistakes you see on the cards. I think I made these in like 3 days. I'll try to go back and fix as much as I can, but I'd prefer not to, considering it's already taken me this long to get this video out. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you can use these, at least for inspiration, if you want to make your own devil fruit to play in a system. If you, like I said, I hope this, more than anything, it just helps you create your own devil fruits if you need to, but I feel like it's also pretty useful if you want to go ahead and use any devil fruits that already exist in canon, Again, feel free to change anything you've seen in this video. It's nothing at all is set in stone. It's all up to change whether you want to do it or not. Yeah, and I think that's all I got for this one. I hope you enjoyed, and if you feel so inclined, feel free to do all those kooky little YouTube things. We got like buttons on here and subscribe buttons and comments. You can do that too. I actually do like getting to read comments. It gives me a lot of useful feedback for this kind of stuff. So please feel free if you have any thoughts. I'd love to hear them. I try to read as many of them as I can. But again, share if you like. That's something I think that makes the video get seen more, I assume. But yeah, feel free to do any of that. If you want to see me on anything, I got like social medias in the bottom. If you want to see any of the stupid crap I post, I have a comic. If you want to read my comic, I need to do more art videos, like make that more, I guess, well known on here. But yeah, I have a webcomic up on Webtoons and on Newgrounds, so whichever your preferred reading platform is, you can find it on there. Ash in Shadow City. I've been working on it for a little bit. I'm not gonna toot my own horn about its quality because I think it's pretty rough around the edges, but I enjoy the practice, getting to learn by doing. I feel like is the best I've learned to do something. So feel free to read that if you'd like. It's out there. I'd appreciate it, and any feedback you want to give me on that. I just had a new chapter come out. By the time this video comes out, hopefully it will be just last month. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, afternoon, or night. And I hope to see you in whatever I post coming forward. So with all that being said, I guess I'll see you in the next one.